When I was in college, I was a communications major. I don't know how I wound up in design, but I was a communications major. And one of my professors once said that all communication is persuasive. Now, at the time, I was working as a technical writer. So immediately my hand shoots up and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not true. All communication is not persuasive because I write really boring documentation for really boring softwares, for supply chain software ran on like an AS400 green screen. There's no way that's persuasive writing. And he started asking some questions, and sure enough, he got me to understand that even that was persuasive writing. And why did the company even have documentation? Well, to help the users. Why was the company helping the users? Well, to add value to the products and make people more comfortable buying it. They use the materials for training, which is an add-on they can sell to make more money. Why did we make the documentation consistent and standardized? Well, so it looks more professional and reflects better on the company. And so even the technical documentation I was doing turned out to be persuasive content. So, you know, as a 20-year-old, that was like a difficult reality to accept that, oh man, I'm like part of the marketing engine of the world. I don't want to be that. I want to be like the cool independent guy. But no, it turns out he was right. All communication is persuasive. And so, you know, essentially what we're doing here, all of us as web professionals, in some way or another, we're involved in that communication process. Whether we're building applications that communicate back and forth with users, whether we are building marketing websites that are trying to sell a product, we are all part of that communication process. And so for us to be good at our job, we have to learn to be persuasive. As sometimes that may chafe against us, but that's just the reality of it. Very well-known designer Milton Glaser once had a set of questions for his students called The Road to Hell. And it was basically a set of questions of, you know, would you do this? Would you do that? What would you be willing to do as a designer? You know, the questions started off pretty simply with things like, would you design a package to look bigger on the shelf? Well, maybe. Supermarket's kind of a competitive place. It's not, you know, it's not super deceptive, but, you know, we kind of play around with it a little bit, make it look a little more prominent and try and bring some more attention. And the questions go on to things like, would you create a commercial that made a boring film seem like a lighthearted comedy? Okay, now this is starting to hurt a little bit because I've gone to those movies that were totally different than the trailer that I watched. That stings. You know? And you shake your fist and you're like, how could they do that? Why would they do that? Well, somewhere along the line was a designer or an ad exec or a copywriter trying to do their job, trying to persuade someone. We all draw that line in a little bit different place. Questions go on to things like, would you promote a diet product that you knew didn't work? I wouldn't. I would have trouble taking on that project. But there are other people that do, obviously, because someone's designing those things. Would you design an ad for a product whose frequent use could result in the user's death? I wouldn't. Some people would. Some people don't see the problem. And he said that every class he did, he had students that they would go all the way. They would answer all the questions. Yeah, I would do that. Now, it's not many of them, fortunately, and I think most of us in this room would agree we draw that line a little bit earlier somewhere in the process. But we have to think through those things. We have to wrestle with that. When you're designing things, and whether or not your job title is designer, you are involved in the process of designing things. When you're designing things, that's kind of a superpower. You know, you are shaping and persuading people to do certain things. You are modifying their actions. You're modifying their perceptions. That's a superpower. You got to use that with responsibility. So, along that road to hell of thinking through, like, how far are we willing to go? What are we willing to do? Where's the line between persuasion and deception? You know, obviously, we're not the first group of people to discuss these issues. Pretty much every major design organization, marketing organization, sales organization, they all have ethical guidelines for what they consider okay and what not. And there really is, you know, there is ethical persuasion. That is a thing. It is legitimate to help your clients or yourself get your voice out into the marketplace, say your piece, defend what you do, extol its virtues, and try to convince people that your thing is the best option. It's part of the marketplace of ideas. Other people are also vying for that, and may the best man win. But as part of that ethical persuasion, all these organizations kind of come up with their code of ethics, and they all basically boil down to the same principles. You know, do no harm, don't tell outright lies at least, don't cheat or steal, protect privacy, respect the audience, promote public good, avoid conflicts of interest, and do your job well. And do your job well is an interesting one because to do that, you have to be persuasive. And, you know, as you know, a young kind of anti-establishment generation, you know, a lot of us tend to be of the mindset of, you know, well, I just want to put myself out there and people can decide if they like it or not. Well, to do your job, to really kind of, to give proper service to the product that you're trying to promote or that you've created or to give it its fair shot in the marketplace, you have to promote it. You have to be a little more convincing than that. You can't just put something out there and hope it takes off. So doing your job well is an interesting aspect of that code of ethics. If someone has hired you to design or build something, you can't just say, here's the thing, and put it on the table and people can get it if they like it. You need to do it well. So while I was doing some of the background research for this, I came across some interesting stories that made me bring up the question, is it ever acceptable to lie to the user? When is it okay to lie to your users, just outright lie? And my initial reaction is never. You should never do that. That's always bad. Some of you might have heard of the Benrath Senior Center in Dusseldorf, Germany. There was an episode of Radiolab about this recently. And they had a problem with their elderly patients who had Alzheimer's, dementia, kind of getting agitated, forgetting where they were, wanting to go home or where they thought was home, and leaving. Now, usually the nurses will catch them, or the front desk people will catch them, but every once in a while, some wily fellow will sneak out, and he'll manage to get on a bus, and next thing you know, he's traveling across Dusseldorf, and they find him, at his childhood home, or the house where he lived before he went into the senior center, and someone else is living there now, and then he's freaking out. Or they find him in the middle of a forest, and they have to call the police, and the police have to go scour the city and try and find this guy who has dementia and doesn't know where he is or where he's going. So to solve the problem, they built a bus stop right in front of the senior center. It's not a real bus stop. No bus goes there, but it sure looks like a real bus stop. And so these patients walk out, and they're agitated, and they're whatever, I hate this place, I'm out of here. They sit down at the bus stop, and they sit and they wait for the bus. 5 or 10 minutes later, one of the nurses comes out, talks to them. Usually the agitation's kind of calmed down. They've sort of forgotten what they were doing. They invite him in for a cup of tea, bring him back in, and everything's kind of back to normal. They lie to the patients to help them and to protect them and to help them not make what would be a very bad and dangerous decision. There's also something called the 1ESS, the first electronic switching system, #1 electronic switching system. This was the first computerized telephone system used by Bell. And it was, as everything was in the 60s, buggy. Computers were not a super reliable platform at the time, so it made mistakes. It would try and dial a number, and somehow it managed to dial the wrong number. And they could detect that. It could tell when it made a mistake, and it did, they started by doing the thing that phone companies do, which is you play an error message. I'm sorry, this number cannot be connected. Please try again, something like that. And the problem is, A, it creates a kind of a public relations problem for the company because it looks like their software is failing all the time, and B, it frustrates the users. So what the engineers did was they just went ahead and connected it. They knew it was the wrong number. They just went ahead and connected it. So what happens? The user picks up, someone else answers, you're like, oh, sorry, wrong number. Hang up, try again. You're not frustrated. You sort of take the responsibility for the wrong number onto yourself. You just assume you pushed the wrong number, dialed something wrong. Pick it up, try again. Now, on one hand, that may be deceptive. The company Bell knew there was a problem, but they didn't state it. Instead, they connected and went through with the mistake, but it actually relieved the stress and frustration on the user compared to getting an error message and hanging up and dialing again. So it's an interesting thing. Sometimes maybe there are occasions where it makes sense to do that. Usually not. So don't use that as a justification to then take that to the opposite extreme. But there are definitely some interesting things to consider there. For example, you can think of placebo buttons. So you have a form, the form auto-saves, but the user doesn't feel like it's saved until they hit the save button. Sometimes you put a save button on there. It doesn't do anything. Hit save, it tells you it's saved. It was saved anyway, but sometimes it helps the user. All right, enough of an ethics lesson. Let's jump in and talk about how we actually persuade people to do things. So the persuasive design model has 3 basic steps. None of these will come across as particularly revolutionary to you. It's all pretty much common sense. But people somehow get it wrong all the time anyway, so we're gonna cover them. And it's all basic human nature. So this all should sound familiar as we talk through it. First step is to motivate the user and remind them of what it is they want to do. Second step is to simplify the experience for the user, and then the third step is to invite them to do the thing that you want them to do. Now, motivation and simplification have an interesting relationship. If you have a highly motivated user, even if your experience is bad, you can still, a lot of the time, get them through the process because they're highly motivated. They'll push through the pain and actually do the thing you want them to do. Likewise, If you have a very simple, easy, straightforward, no pain kind of process, even if the users are not very motivated, they might just go ahead and do it anyway. But if you can get them motivated and simplify the process for them, when you issue that invitation, you're up in this territory and you get a much higher rate of conversion. You get a much higher rate of people accepting the thing that you're proposing that they do. So the first step is to motivate the user. What does that mean? Well, if you've ever taken a psychology class, you know there are lots of different theories on human motivation. You're probably familiar with, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and some of the other ones that are out there. None of them quite work the way I wish they did. I always find like little glitches with them, at least applying to these kinds of problems. So I've kind of broken them out a little differently. It's similar to most. Again, nothing revolutionary here. It's just a convenient model for looking at them. But the 5 basic human motivators are security, pleasure, affiliation, aspiration, and identity. So that's kind of the structure I use in my head to figure out what are we doing here? What are we doing with this interface? How are we approaching it? How are we communicating these things? And the goal isn't necessarily to create motivation in people. The goal is just to remind them of the motivations that they already have. People are already motivated. They already want all of those things. They're already pursuing them. You don't have to create that. All you have to do is kind of remind them of what it was that they were trying to do anyway. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? You go and you get a checkup. And the doctor's like, you really gotta start working out. And for 2 months you're all about it, going to the gym, and then all of a sudden that Saturday comes, you're like, I really just kind of want to sleep in today. And then you start to forget. You forget what the doctor told you. You forget your health is in jeopardy. You forget your motivations, and you just go back to the way you were doing things before. And there's a saying that discipline is just remembering what you want. Well, human beings, the reason that we're not always good at discipline, we're not always good at remembering what we want to do. Sometimes we need those reminders. We need, personal trainers who remind us all the time, this is why you're doing this. This is what this is your motivation for doing this. So let's jump into these a little bit and kind of explore some of them. So with security, I kind of knew if I went to ADT, I was going to find a security motivation message. While you're out, don't let them in. ADT loves to use kind of the fear-based version of that. But security doesn't have to be that literal, not necessarily about like home security. It can really be about a sense of just getting things under control. That anxiety of what's going on, I don't know what's going to happen next, things feel like they're out of control. In fact, SolarCity just, their main motivation message, get control over energy costs. It's basically implying energy costs are out of control. Here's how you can get them back into control. And so it's appealing to that motivation for security. Career Builder, if you're looking for a job, you're probably freaked out a little bit. They made the image a little hard to read, but it says find the right job right now. So those are the 2 things you want to do if you're out of a job, right? You want to get a job, ideally the right job, and you want it fast. So it's appealing to that sense of security. You can have a job, the right job right now if you use Career Builder. That's the underlying premise. Square, start selling today. Any business owner knows that the thing you're most panicked about is not selling today, so selling today sounds really great. And Harvest, for example, let's get to work. Spend less time tracking and more time doing. I literally had a conversation 2 days ago. I have a friend who sold her stake in a company and is now doing consulting, and so she's building up this consulting practice. She'd never done services before. So she called me and she says, how the heck do you track time? I feel like I'm spending all my time managing time and managing invoices and dealing with the administrative stuff. I don't have any time left to actually do the work, and I have these deadlines coming up. She's feeling that security panic, so that motivation's coming through. And I literally told her, you go use Harvest because that'll solve most of those problems. So there's some legitimacy to their claim. It actually is a great service for doing that. So that's security. The next one is pleasure. This one's pretty straightforward. It's not super hard to know that people enjoy pleasure. Any chocolate brand, go to any chocolate marketing materials, and you're going to find pleasure, decadence, indulgence, sensual, all those kind of words, all about physically pleasing things. Food brands generally do this a lot. Sometimes they don't even have to talk about it. Burger King's introducing a new line of grilled hot dogs. All they have to say is introducing grilled dogs and have big picture of hot dogs. And I know Burger King's gross. I know hot dogs are gross. But looking at that picture, I want to eat them. I want to eat them. And it can be psychological pleasure as well. So, Disneyland, feel the force like never before. You know, that's kind of an interesting angle on it, but that's still like, oh, I want to feel the forest. That sounds awesome. So there are lots of ways to do that, but it's basically appealing to that motivation for pleasure. Affiliation is another very strong one. Again, softball. Went to meetup.com. I knew they'd have an affiliation-oriented message. Meetups are neighbors getting together to learn something, do something, and share something. That sounds great, right? We all want neighbors. We all want that sense of community. But you can find it in other places as well. You go to Under Armour. We run. We are runners. Alone, together, we fight. So they're kind of establishing a tribe, and it's a cool tribe, and you want to be part of this tribe. You want to join other people like you. So buy Under Armour, I guess. Tinder, obviously, affiliation, motivation. They actually have a whole like video sequence that goes on in their website that tells the story of kind of going through this courtship process. But again, all driving very directly at that sense of affiliation, which is obvious for Tinder, less obvious for Airbnb. So Airbnb, their campaign is live there. That's the difference between Airbnb and like a hotel. You're not just going somewhere; you're living there. It's like you're one of the natives. Experience a place like you live there, and of course, very affiliation-oriented photos going on behind it. So again, it's that sense of, I'm cool because I'm like the locals. I'm one of them. I'm not just a tourist, because nobody wants to be the uncool tourist. So that's how Airbnb is using the affiliation motivation to drive their messaging. And Zillow, you could take a look for real estate prices, which is relatively abstract and boring. But when you turn it into find your way home, and they remind you that you're trying to, you're not just trying to find a property, you're trying to build a home. That may keep you on the website 10 more minutes instead of just giving up. It might make you contact someone when you wouldn't have contacted them otherwise, because you're like, I'm about to give up, but I gotta build a home. I gotta do this, and you power through just that little bit more, which then makes them extra millions of dollars. Aspiration is another one. The desire to get harder, better, stronger, faster. Emirates Airlines, you've arrived the moment you board. So if you fly Emirates, then that means you're a big shot, which if I flew Emirates, I'd kind of feel like a big shot. So there's some validity to that. But it can be simpler than that. It doesn't necessarily have to be, money aspiration or anything. Salesforce. Accenture moves faster with Salesforce Lightning. Well, Accenture's big, well-known, respected consulting firm. If I'm a small firm, I want to be more like Accenture. It says they move faster. That means faster than they used to. It means, by implication, faster than I'm going. So I want to be better, and so I aspire to be more like Accenture. So they kind of play on that. Coursera, take the world's best courses online, not just online courses, the world's best courses. And then they list some of the world's best schools underneath just to reinforce the point. Upwork, where will great work take you? They're making you think, like, what if all my stuff was awesome? How would my business be doing? Where could I go with that? Lowe's has a fantastic tagline, never stop improving. So, that ties into that do-it-yourself mentality. It's kind of a play between make yourself better and make your home better, doing home improvement work. And, a lot of times as we're fairly analytical people in this room typically, so we might look at something like that as just being marketing fluff. It's not marketing fluff. There's a reason all these websites have these messages on there. They're reminding you of your motivation. When you come to Lowe's and you have to buy a hammer or something, you poke around, you look around, maybe you're not seeing anything that you like, but I can't stop improving. I got to get this hammer. I got to build this shed. I got to do this. And you stick around on the site 10 more minutes, and maybe you buy a hammer where you wouldn't have bought a hammer otherwise. So it has direct correlations to revenue and conversion rates and things like that. And then there's identity, just the idea of finding out who we are, defining who we are, expressing who we are. Uber does this. So their tagline on their website, get there, your day belongs to you. It's not Uber is mostly cheaper than a taxi. It's Uber, your day belongs to you. And they actually do some clever kind of interplay here, because it's not quite clear if they're talking about the drivers or the passengers, because they need both. That's a really, really overly happy looking Uber driver. But one of the benefits of being an Uber driver, your day belongs to you. So they have kind of a dual implication thing. Without specifically calling out drivers and the fact that they need drivers, they're making that sale also. Pandora, free personalized radio that plays the music you love. It's a little bit redundant. That's what personalized radio is, right? But they want to drive the point home. So it's specifically about the things that you want and your identity and your likes. Monster, different from Career Builder. So where Career Builder had kind of the security play, Monster says get found for employees. So if you want to find a job, it doesn't say find a job. It says get found. They'll come to you because you are the magnificent unicorn, and that's how you see yourself, and they will come to you. Etsy, whoever you are, find what you're into. Volunteermatch.org, they play it pretty heavily, as you might have to with a volunteer-driven organization. We bring good people and good causes together. Are you a good person? Find a cause that lights you up. Get in touch with a nonprofit that needs you. What do you care about? So again, these are all tied back to identity. Do I see myself as this kind of person or not? And if I do, then that kind of language is going to remind me, okay, I am this kind of person. I got to do these things. Now, the thing about motivation is you got to know when to stop talking. Sometimes you can overplay that a little bit. You can, if they're already, again, this is about you need them highly motivated, and then you need to make a simple experience. If they come to you highly motivated, you don't need to sit there and keep talking about it. Just step out of the way and let them get right to the process. Expedia, for example, not a whole lot of marketing message on here. You go to Expedia.com, there's the form. They know you want to travel. They know you're looking for a flight. Here's the form. Just jump right into it. Now, in most cases, that's not you. Most of the situations that you guys are in are not ones where you have super highly motivated users ready to go and you just need to get out of the way and give them access to the thing. It's much more common that the mistake is made on the sense of under-motivating users. As a relatively analytical group of people, we tend to think if we just put the product out there, logical people will use it. Well, people are not very logical, and they forget what they're trying to do all the time, and they get distracted, and there are all kinds of reasons why they won't do something, and they need that extra nudge. They need that reminder of what it is they're trying to accomplish. So, step 1, motivate. Step 2, simplify. How do you make the experience easier and take away the roadblocks, take away the obstacles, take away the friction that then prevents them from doing the thing that they are motivated to do? I don't know if you guys have ever watched curling. Curling is an awesome, weird sport. I love watching curling. They take a huge rock with a handle on it and they slide it across the ice, and then a bunch of other people sweep the ice with a broom to get the rock where it needs to go. And I kind of think of designers as the sweepers. There's a big rock, it needs to get to a certain place, and we have to clear a path, reduce the friction, clear it out so the rock just slides and it gets right where you want it. That's kind of what we do as designers. So there's kind of a hierarchy of user experience that helps a lot with simplifying the process and kind of clearing things out so that people can do things. The first step is functionality. The thing has to do or have the things that people are looking for. That's pretty basic. I don't need to dive too much into that. The second tier is intuitiveness. So when a user comes to it, they need to know and be able to figure out what the next step is. They shouldn't have to read instructions. They shouldn't have to, sit and search around and try and figure it out. It should just be intuitive. As web professionals, we actually have a very high annoyance threshold. We sometimes don't feel like we do. I'm sure we all get agitated from time to time and don't necessarily feel like we are the people who are hard to annoy. But in our daily life, this is us as web professionals. So, if you're writing code and you put a semicolon in the wrong place and you have to spend 45 minutes tracking down a single semicolon, and then you see it and you're like, the fact that you can then go back and keep coding instead of giving that course up for the rest of your life shows that you have a high tolerance for annoyance. Unfortunately, what that does is it makes us different from users. Users typically have a low annoyance threshold. If they spend 2 minutes and they can't find the semicolon, they're done with that thing for life. We self-select. The people who make it as web professionals are people who can power through difficult stuff. And we forget sometimes that most people are not in that category of people. So even something as simple, for example, as the hamburger menu on Spotify. So Spotify recently redesigned. They got rid of the hamburger menu. This is the hamburger menu up in the top left. It's one of the most universal design conventions used in mobile right now, and it totally doesn't work. So when they redesigned, they switched the navigation options that were behind the hamburger menu to a tab bar down at the bottom. This should be common sense. This should be common sense. If you take things that people need and want and you hide them under something that doesn't look at all like what they need or want, nobody will find it. Everyone in this room knows what a hamburger menu is, and still you guys will actually click on it less than if you have the thing right in front of you. That's basic UX. Everyone knows, like any UX person knows those principles of you don't take important things and hide them behind something else. However, as an industry, we so wanted the hamburger to work that we just like adopted it overnight, instantly. Everyone adopted it. Everything used the hamburger menu. Take all the big, nasty desktop navigation, cram it under the sexy little bars in the corner. Easy design solution, right? Now that all the anecdotal evidence and test results and A/B testing and stuff comes in, people are finding out it totally doesn't work. And that should have been obvious from the beginning because it's not intuitive. If you want to see your playlists, or let's say you want to use the radio feature. So you look around the site for something that says radio. You don't see anything. You give up. You don't go, oh, I should go click on the 3 bars on the top corner. There's nothing intuitive about that. It's totally counterintuitive. So by making it intuitive, they significantly increase their menu clicks, and there are lots and lots of stories like this. So functionality intuitiveness, a lot of times that's as far as people get in user experience design. They think, I made it functional, I made it intuitive, I'm done, right? There's a lot more than that. Efficiency is the next one. So not only is it intuitive, but you need to make it an efficient process, just so that people don't get kind of exhausted halfway through and give up. There's a lot of fatigue that sets in when you have to keep clicking, keep looking, keep doing things. There was a study done that shows that a 1-second page load delay can result in as much as 11% fewer views, 16% less customer satisfaction, and 7% fewer conversions. And even if those sound like tolerable numbers, if you feel like you can absorb that impact, you have to remember the delay on your site might not be 1 second. It might be 2 seconds. It might be 3 seconds. It might be 4 seconds. How much have you lost if you're 4 seconds slower than a competing site? And we don't think about it consciously. This is all stuff that happens at an unconscious level when a user's on the site, but they hit the button, it's taking too long, I'll go do something else. And people really do that. Almost all of the statistics done about user load time show that people will abandon things if they take a second or two too long. In addition, each additional step or click, each additional page you have to load, you can lose, according to the studies, anywhere between 30 and 60%, but anecdotally, I've seen sites where they lose 90 to 95% of the user traffic with each additional step that has to be done. So the numbers can even extend much higher than that. Bob Prohaska wrote an article recently called Efficient UX Isn't Always the Best UX. And so you have to be careful when you're thinking through efficiency because it can get a little weird. And he listed 2 sites that he really liked. He's an avid biker. One of them was BikeTiresDirect.com, which is relatively efficient in the sense that they kind of get all the stuff up there. Here are all the things. He has another site that he likes, Salsa, much simpler, leaner site. It doesn't necessarily have everything up front the way you might expect, but this psychologically is actually easier to process. It's easier to understand. So cognitively, it's more efficient. So efficiency doesn't just mean cram everything up and cram everything together into this dense user interface. It can also mean simplify and streamline things. On the Obama campaign side, this was their donate form. The original is on the left and had all the steps in one form. So you could just do it all in one shot. It's all right there. Technically, that might be considered the more efficient one. They changed it over to one where all it asks is how much would you like to donate today, and then has the buttons for the amount. You click on an amount, and then it takes you to the rest of the form to fill it out. So one advantage of that is you kind of get a yes pattern going. So you've already said you'll donate an amount, so when you get to the form, you're already in motion there. But it also cognitively is more efficient, even though it's an additional step. So again, all of these rules can and sometimes are be broken, because in this context, splitting something up into multiple clicks actually made more sense and converted higher. So again, we heard in one of the recent talks, context is everything. There are no universal rules in design, none. Every rule can be broken. Just make sure you know what you're doing before you break it. The next step in the hierarchy of user experience is comfort. So that can be physical comfort, like being readable, being usable, font sizes are big enough, buttons are clickable, you can click them with your fingers on the phone. So there's that kind of ergonomic comfort. There's also psychological comfort, which is the part that's more often overlooked. So you've probably seen any form you're filling out, it asks you for address to. What the heck is address to? I still sometimes wonder what address to is. But historically, that's always been phrased as address to. So on forms, because that's what people have always seen, designers just add in address 1, address 2. And they never really stop to explain what is address 2. On Amazon, because they understand things like psychological comfort, they explain what address 2 is and exactly what kinds of things you should be putting in there. And that's a great opportunity to provide comfort in just subconscious ways. Most people don't, if you ask them if they're uncomfortable about address 2, they would say no. But if you know, there are little delays, and Amazon measures the crap out of this stuff. So if they put that in there, you know they tested it, and you know they A/B tested with or without, and this one works better. People buy more stuff because they explain what address 2 is. It's little things like that. It's thinking through and having empathy for the user and understanding where might those tensions be, even if they can't express them themselves. Nobody said to them, hey, what is address 2 supposed to be? But they figured out that that could be a tension point and experimented with it. Crazy Egg, for example, switched from a money-back guarantee model to a free trial model. So instead of sign up with your credit card and you get a free trial, and if you don't like it, you can get reimbursed, to a free trial where you sign up, you don't need the credit card, and you can just roll ahead safely. There's psychological comfort there. They got 116% boost in signups. SafeSoft has a product called Market Dialer, and they tested a version of their form that had the price rate on it. People don't like to sign up for things when they don't know how much it's going to cost. So putting the price on it gave them a 100% jump in the leads that were generated. That's pretty substantial, just by putting the price on there. TurboTax, similarly. Hi, Michael. Welcome back to TurboTax. We've saved all your info, and we're ready to pick up right where we left off. And then even the button says, pick up right where I left off. So again, psychological comfort. It makes you feel like everything is okay when you use TurboTax. Amazon, again, you know, if Amazon does things, you know they've tested it. But they put lots of reviews. It's a very review-driven site. The interesting thing about Amazon reviews is even the bad reviews don't necessarily matter. You know, if you look at this and you know, Christine T says, okay, but not what I was hoping for. I don't particularly like the illustrations, but my son likes to read it. I'm thinking, well, Christine has a stick up her butt, so I'm just going to skip that one. Everyone else says it's 5 stars, so I'm going to go for it. So even if the reviews are bad, just having the reviews gives us psychological comfort. Harvest, again, is another great example of this. These are just a few of the little bits of the interface that give context and comfort and help you understand where you are in the application, what you're looking at. And they do a lot to kind of reassure you so you understand the context for what you're doing. So that's comfort. And then the final one is delight. You know, once you've worked through those other things, you can start to introduce elements of delight, which are just those nice kind of human quirks and you know, things that make it fun to use an application or a website. MailChimp is well known for this. So for example, if you put in a username that's already taken, it says maybe it's your evil twin, Spooky. Trello, you know, just something as simple as the placeholder text, Lando Calrissian. Now, that might not be your brand. You might not have a brand that could be fun and wacky and quirky. You know, that's maybe, in fact, a little bit overplayed these days because everyone does that. But there are lots of ways you can create delight and kind of scale it back. This is the Slack homepage, for example. And they just have this nice feature where they put some stuff on there and they animate it a little bit. There's nothing particularly crazy or wacky there, but instead of just putting the text there, they added some elements of delight that makes you pay a lot more attention to it and focus on those words a lot more. And you can even create delight just by making something well and helping people kind of progress with it. So on the, you know, as the challenges that someone faces increase, their skills and abilities should increase as well. If they don't, they kind of get to a state where they have anxiety. Like my problems are growing faster than my capacity to deal with them. But if your skill grows and you have all these capabilities before you need them, you kind of get to a stage of boredom. So there's benefit to revealing functionality as a user goes through something, and as they get the basics down, then they learn there's a new feature right around the time they realize that they wanted that feature. And then they can kind of achieve this state of flow where you're going right up the middle, and your capacity to do things within a tool increases with your desire to do things within that tool. I use a tool called Wunderlist to kind of keep track of the many, many, many to-do lists I have. These are not separate to-do lists. Those are just folders of to-do lists. But the great thing about this is that it's fast, it's lean, it's efficient, it gets out of my way, and I can just go kerchunk, 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 kerchunk through my tasks. I use this all day, every day. And and it has additional features, but it doesn't push them on you. I don't come into an overwhelming interface. You come into it, and the interface itself is very simple and straightforward. But then as you realize, I wish I could share this list with someone. Well, there's a sharing feature. Or I wish I could sort by this. Well, there is a sort feature. They're not shoved in my face, but they're there as I need them. So I kind of get into that state of flow and grow with it. So that's the hierarchy of user experience. And then the third step, so first step, motivate. Second step, simplify. Third step is to invite. So Solar City, for example, they motivate you, they simplify it, and then they invite you to do something. So this one is see if you qualify, enter your zip code. And you kind of have to go through a courtship process. You don't jump right to the final sale. Your first call to action isn't you should buy this car or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Sometimes you have to walk through a few additional steps. Sometimes it's take this survey. Sometimes it is sign up for this download. But you always want to make sure that there is a next step. There should always be a next action that you're working toward, rather than just saying, "Hey, here's some stuff." You can kind of think of it like a those people who aren't really good at text conversations. It's that friend who texts you and says, "Hey, hey, what's up?" Nothing. What are you doing? Nothing. So don't be, as you're trying to promote, don't be that guy. Don't just say, "Hey, here's some stuff." Drive towards something. Give them a next step. Ask a question. Do a next thing. And there are a lot of things that you can do. If you have trouble thinking of them, you can start looking at content marketing. You can look at conversion rate optimization. And a lot of options there. There are a lot of things that you can do for a next step. It doesn't just have to be buy the product. However, you don't want to do all these all at once. You want to keep it simple. At any given point, you shouldn't be asking for more than 2, maybe 3 things. The idea is that you have a main one that you want people to do, but if they skip over that, there's kind of like a follow-up one, and you can catch them that way also. And you want to experiment. You want to test different scenarios and kind of see what works best, see how people move through the process. Some things will work. Something that worked for me might totally fail for you, and vice versa. It's all based on the individual context for your project. Again, there are no universal rules. But it basically boils down to don't be afraid to ask for the sale. If you're pitching someone, you want to ask them to buy the thing. If you're trying to get a job, you want to ask for the job. Don't just say, "Hey, I do this," and wait for people to buy it. You got to ask for it. And so that's why you want to have those invitations and those calls to action. So that is the persuasive design model. I want to walk you quickly through an example. I actually just found this yesterday. So this is Rise, which is an HR platform. And actually, I was taking a look at MailChimp, and I had exactly 1,500 subscribers on my list. And then while I was looking at it, I went back, and then there were 1,501. And I was like, my round number got messed up. But the person who signed up was from Rise, and so I went and checked it out. It was rise.xyz, and I was like, that's kind of a cool domain. I'll go check it out. And it turned out they actually were a pretty good example of the things that we're talking about. So whoever designed this site did a really good job. Again, it's not necessarily about aesthetics, but about how they communicated this persuasive design. So let's break this down real quick. HR software is dead. If you're an HR director, that's appealing to your sense of security. Like, oh man, everything that we're doing is a lie. What do I do now? Rise is the world's first people and culture platform. So people and culture, identity. If you're an HR person, you don't want to be like the boring HR person. You want to be the culture, human-oriented one. And then affiliation, people and culture. That's baked right in. And then they have kind of this breakdown here. In the past it was old human resources, and it's hard to see there, but they just have like social security number, stats, and stuff back there, and this grim-looking HR person. But over here, happy. This is great. This is the future. So you got the pleasure aspect, and you got the aspiration aspect. I want to work in a company like that. I want to work in a place where people are happy. So they motivated, then we simplified. Well, their whole message is this graphic with 2 sides. That's human and resources, and this is the new way, people and culture. They also say it's the world's first, which simplifies by kind of reducing the anxiety of, what are their credentials? What makes this special? What makes this different? And then up at the top, it says, we've released our first book. Well, that establishes expertise. It establishes that there's longevity into the future, obviously, because they're planning to release other books. So they have motivation, simplification, and then they invite. They say, download the book. Or they say, put in your name and email address to see the actual application. and they also have a little contact thing down at the bottom. So just within that top frame, they've covered all 5 motivations, drastically simplified, and they managed to get at least 3 calls to action in there for the invitation process. So that was just one I happened to see last night and decided I'd stick it in here because it's a good example of the things we're talking about. Thank you. I'm James Archer. This has been Designing for Intention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Yes.
How do you balance the progressive disclosure versus the not hiding things? Like,
Oh man,
the hamburger menu is
such a good question.
challenge, but then there's other places where it's like
That
showing everything is too much, showing nothing is not enough.
that is such an insightful question. Yeah. So the question is, thank you for the reminder. The question is, how do you balance progressive disclosure, so revealing things slowly over time, when we were talking about how you get into a flow state, versus hiding things that people actually need. And there's a balance there. Most of it has to do with information sent. So you can hide things as long as people can figure out where to get them. The hamburger menu is the worst way. It's 3 lines. It doesn't tell anyone crap about anything. So there's no way to do it. There's some evidence that shows if you put the word menu there, you'll get like a 3% uptick in results. But even that's pretty junky. Those are bad results. Because when you think, how do I find my playlist? How do I find radio? You don't think menu. You think words like radio and playlist. So you scan, and whatever smells like the thing that you need, you go after that. So most of the answer to that question has to do with information sent. You want to make sure that things are put in places that people can sniff them out. Other questions?
You talk about in your hierarchy experience comfort, but there are some sites where specifically want to introduce discomfort in order to bring people to action. Does that actually fit in there somewhere at the comfort level, or where does that fit in?
Great question. So the question is, how do you balance creating comfort as part of simplifying the UX experience against something like the security motivation, for example, where you're strategically making people uncomfortable? So I think in that case, when we talk about comfort, we're talking about comfort in the user experience and comfort moving forward. We're looking for friction, obstacles, roadblocks. So for example, if you go to the ADT site, they want to make you feel uncomfortable, like someone is literally, while you're looking at the screen, climbing in the back window of your house. But they want to clear the path for what you do next. So there's a clear call to action, there's a clear button, there's a clear next step. So it's kind of splitting those things out. But that's a great question. Sometimes you do want to introduce strategic discomfort. It's easy to overplay that, but strategically you may do that in some cases to get people into motion, and then you want to clear the path in front of them. Thank you. Was there another question in the back?
You kind of answered it. I was going to go back to your, you had intuitiveness as like level 4, and efficiency is level 3, and I was thinking, if your site's not efficient, coming more from a developer stand than a marketing stand, I was thinking if the site's not efficient, you're not even going to be able to get them into the site before they're backing up to even find out whether or not your site's intuitive. So I was trying to figure out like efficiency, and you kind of answered it by the whole clearing the path thing. You want it's got to be efficient to get them from what you're trying to say to get them to sign up. So yeah.
Right. That's a great insight. Is kind of what's that relationship between efficiency and intuitiveness, because sometimes to make something more intuitive, you want to hold their hand through the process. I think some of that may come down to that sense of flow. So there are applications where you make it very simple and kind of hold their hand in the first stages of the project, but then you need to get out of the way. Something I've seen a lot of problem with is people can't get out of the hand-holding stage. And so, when I use it the first time, it's great if they walk me through the process, but the 7th time I use it, or the 150th time I use it, I want that thing to happen in like a half second. And I can't sit there and wait for the animations to load and wait for the funny messages and all that. I want it to move fast. And so sometimes the way you address that interplay is by changing the interface a little bit so that more experienced users have a leaner interface, or focuses more on efficiency, where for the new ones maybe it's focusing more on intuitiveness. All right, we're out of time, but I am very available to you guys. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to grab me anytime. I'm happy to talk. Thank you.